All right, 1, 2, 3. This is my Bible. It is Yah's word. It is the inspired, infallible word of Yah. It is a lamp unto my feet. Blessed are those who hear the word and keep it. I find out who I am in the pages contained herein. This is my Bible. All right, we've got a few more minutes for morning, so good morning. Today's message is actually the conclusion of a 3-part series that you didn't know I was in, because I didn't know I was in. So the first one was the fallacy of Christianity. We did that sermon. Then the next one was follow the instructions. Then today's message is titled the state of lawlessness. So let's define lawlessness. Lawlessness is the quality or condition of being without regard for the law, behavior that is contrary to or shows indifference to the law. So we define this as without regard to the law. We understand? Amen. So let's look at our key verse, and we've discussed this verse a lot. This is Pastor Cheryl goes over this verse at least once a month, at least. And we've gone over it in the past few weeks. And it's Matthew chapter 7, 21 to 23. Not everyone, this is Jesus talking, okay? Not everyone who says to me, Adonai, Adonai, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Adonai, Adonai, have we not prophesied in your name, and done many wonders in your name? And then I, meaning Jesus, will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness, you who practice no regard to the law. Now this is very important, because people will always say that the law isn't about salvation, right? Like you can eat pork. That don't mean you're not going to go to heaven or hell. That's not a salvation issue. That's American Christians' favorite thing to say. It's not a salvation issue. But the Messiah himself. So forget what Paul said. Forget what your pastor said. They can't even say the pastor's on TikTok because TikTok is gone. R.I.P. to Tikiana Takiana. She lived a long life. But the Messiah says, tell those that do not follow the law, get away from me. Does that sound like a good thing? No. Is there salvation away from Jesus? Is there salvation away from Jesus? How can we have salvation without Jesus? Because somebody's saying yes. Okay. His name literally means the salvation of Yah. That's literally what his name meant. When he said, I'm coming in my Father's name, he's like, I'm coming to bring salvation through my Father. Let's keep getting instructions from the Messiah, okay? Because we need to hold true what he has commanded us, right? Because it doesn't matter what anybody else said. It matters what our Messiah said, because he's the one that bridged the gap for us. Now, no disrespect to Paul, but we should be able to quote what Jesus said a lot more than what Paul has said. Now, do you guys remember the message that I did about the wheat and the tares? Hopefully. So Jesus himself said that he planted a garden, and that Jesus said he planted wheat. But he said during the night, an enemy planted tares. Now again, before they harvest, tares and wheat look identical to the untrained eye. The workers asked him, hey, somebody planted tares along with the wheat. Should we pull out the tares Jesus said no, because to the untrained eye, you can't tell the difference between the wheat and the tares. So wait for them to blossom, because they look alike, but they don't act alike. Because a weed does different things than what a fruit does, right? Just like Jesus said about the people to depart from him. They looked alike, but they didn't act alike. Because when he says depart from me, he's not talking to the pagans. He's not talking to the atheists or the Muslims or the devil worshipers, is he? Because the devil worshiper wouldn't speak in his name. Only Christians do. The Muslims don't say, we did great works in Jesus' name. They don't say that. But who would say that? Christians would say, we spoke in your name. We did miracles in your name. But he's like, I don't know y'all. Again, the wheat and the tares look alike, but they don't act alike. Just like sugar and salt. Look alike from a distance, but next time you're making Kool-Aid, put some salt in it and see how that works out for you. I'll never go to your house again. Because those tares told Jesus, we spoke in your name. Devil worshippers don't do that. And he's telling these Christians to depart from him. Let's see what else he says. Because he talked about the untrained eye not being able to notice the difference between the wheat and the tares. Now the thing is, Jesus explains this parable to his disciples because the disciples never were getting it. They were missing it all the time. So we're going to see what Jesus himself says when he explicitly explains this parable. So it isn't Pastor Darren that's coming up with this conclusion, talking about Christians are the tares. Let's see what Jesus says. Matthew chapter 13, 36 through 42. Then Jesus sent the multitude away and went into the house. And his disciples came to him saying, I'm going to pause. This isn't in my notes, but it's just always funny. In the American church, we always say Jesus was homeless, but then there's numerous times where it says Jesus went home. I don't know how homeless people have homes, but that's another sermon, I guess. And his disciples came to him saying, explain to us the parable of the tares of the field, because we're stupid. We didn't get it. Went over our heads. Verse 37, he answered and said to them, he who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. Who's the Son of Man? Jesus. The field is the world. The good seeds are the sons of the kingdom. But the tares are the sons of the wicked one. The enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of age, and the reapers are the angels. Therefore, as the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of this age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all things that offend, and those who practice lawlessness, and will cast them into the furnace of fire. There will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Now again, in the American church, we love to say, well, the law is not a salvation issue. What did the Messiah say? So, I don't care what Paul said, because in the hierarchy, it's the Father, the Son, and Paul's way down there. He doesn't rank. And again, no disrespect to Paul, because Paul echoed everything that Jesus said, if you actually read the whole thing and not a verse that the American church like to cherry pick from it. The Messiah is saying that the devil has planted a seed, planted a weed among the believers. Are we catching that? Yeah. Which would mean that throughout the church, there are tares that are planted that are the son of the wicked one. But what did the Messiah say that he was going to expel from his garden? What type of people? Verse 41.
Lawless people.
the Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all things that offend, and those who practice lawlessness, those that have no regard for the law. So, I'm jumping ahead. Let me calm down. For all the talking that Jesus did of the law, I don't see how we can come to the conclusion that the law has passed away. Because the time period that Jesus is talking about, is he talking about 33 AD? Right here? What time is he talking about? Later. He said at the end of time. So that's after the writings of Paul. That's after the American church that came out of the Roman church, that came out of Greek culture and Greek philosophy. Because all the things that we believe in the American church came from the Greeks. It didn't come from the Hebrews and what they believed. All the things that we believe, you can't find it in Scripture, but you can find it in the philosophers. But that's another sermon, and that'll get in a lot of trouble. So, not going down that. That'll be another time later on. Let's continue. In Matthew chapter 24, verse 12, Jesus states that in the end times, lawlessness will increase. Those that have no regard to the law, it will increase in that time. But let's see what Yah said about the Messiah and lawlessness. Going to go to Hebrews chapter 1, verse 8 and 9. Getting a little too excited up here, and I'm thinking about all the things I have to say. But hopefully it's in the notes. So this is the author of Hebrews talking. And then it's starting off in the middle of something. It says, but to the Son, he says, so this is the Father saying, but to the Son, he says, your throne, O Elohim, is forever and ever. A scepter of righteousness is the scepter of your kingdom. You have loved righteousness and hated lawlessness. Therefore, Elohim, Adonai, your Adonai, has anointed you with the oil of gladness and more than your companions. So Yah stated that his Son loves righteousness and hates lawlessness. So if he hated lawlessness yesterday, how does he feel about it today and tomorrow? Because the same author in Hebrews said he's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and forever. So if he hated it before, he didn't change his mind. Didn't he say God is not a man that shall lie? We all love to quote that. He doesn't change. Regardless of what your pastor says, regardless of what Paul says, or the guy in this video that says in the car. Because nobody knows the Son more than the Father. The Father said that his Son hates lawlessness. Like for you that have kids, who could best describe your child? Right. If I sit there and try to, so was this Benita? You know, a thing about DJ is, it's like, bro, you see him once a week. And sometimes not even. And for an hour. But let's see. Let's get some more evidence of this. Let's see who the disciple that Jesus loved says about all of this. Gonna go to 1 John chapter 3, 2 through 4. Beloved, now we are children of Yah, and it has not been revealed what we shall be. But we know that when he is revealed, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. And everyone who has this hope in him purifies himself just as he is pure. Whoever commits sin also commits lawlessness, and sin is lawlessness. We following along? I talked about it before that sin is lawlessness. Sin, the Greek word for sin, is hamtaro or something like that. And it's a Greek word that means to miss the mark. It comes from archery. So the bullseye is the mark, but that mark is the law. It's like if we miss it, that's sin. If we follow it, bullseye, you win. Paul himself stated that he only knows what sin is because of the law. But in the American European church, we don't like to follow the rules. The early Roman Greek philosophers met and they literally stated that we are not going to follow any of the Torah. Too many rules. We're not going to do that. We want, in the American church, and not we at Living Word, we want to do whatever we want. We have such rebellious spirits. Think back to the story of the wheat and the tares. Again, who planted the wheat? Open question, say it louder so everybody can hear. Jesus. Who planted the tares? Now, one gardener said, and I just gave you examples of him saying this and other people echoing it. So one gardener said, follow these rules to show that you love me. Because he said, if you love me, you will follow my rules. The other gardener said, do whatever you want. No rules. We don't have to follow it. That's done away with. Does anybody know? It'll be quite strange if you do. But does anybody know what the main pillar of Satanism is? No. And I'm going to give you a hint that it's not worship of the devil. The main pillar of Satanism is do what thou wilt. That's the main thing they believe in. Do whatever you want. I was going to put, there's some entertainers in our industry that wear shirts that say this, but I did not want to put it up there because then turn it into a different sermon. But this is a very popular thing that they proclaim, do what thou wilt. That isn't even how they talk. They don't talk like King James. But they all wear this shirt. This is the main pillar. Like, this is the sign. It has it on there. This is their logo. I didn't make this up. I didn't sit there on Google and say, oh, let me create an image. Do whatever you want. So, does the wheat believe in this or do the tares believe in this? Tares. We do not understand how entrenched the tares are in our faith. And we don't recognize this because the tares look like wheat. But the tares will tell the wheat, do whatever you want to do. You don't have to follow that. Eat whatever you like. Go wherever you want. Dress however you want. They can't judge you. It's your body, your choice. And I'm not talking about when people usually say with that. But they say all these things and all these excuses why not to follow the instructions, while the gardener of the wheat said, follow my instructions. I don't see how we can elevate half a verse of what Paul said somewhere when the Son himself, whom all things were created, who died on the tree for us, who opened the door for us, said, no, follow the rules. I'm going to show you how to do it so you have an example, because everybody in the book of the law failed. Abraham failed. Jacob failed a whole bunch of times. Like, all these brothers failed. Let me show you how to do it the correct way. And his disciples and Paul continued to do this, because people always bring up, no, because Peter was eating, and when he had the dream, he woke up and he ate. Peter himself told Jesus in that vision, I've never eaten anything unclean. So why would you tell me to eat a snake? And Jesus is like, bro, you still don't get it after all these years. I ain't talking about the snake. I'm talking about Cornelius. Like, be nice to him. He's a good dude. But got to read the Bible for that. We don't like to do that. In the book of Malachi, literally right before the verse that the only verse that anybody in Malachi quotes, which is do not rob God, how should a man rob God in your tithes and offering? It's the only verse everybody knows about Malachi. Nobody read any else of the book. But we know that one. Don't rob God. The Most High Yah states that we need to follow his decrees in order for us to return to him. So literally right before the part about robbing him, he says, you need to come back and follow what I said to do. But it's funny we don't quote that verse, but the church will definitely quote, pay your tithes and offering. But they won't quote the follow the decrees part. He doesn't change. If it was important to him then, it's important to him now. If it was important to his son, it's important to the Father. But who cares about, because we love to just, in the American church, not us, we love to pull a random verse from Paul. It's like, oh, we're not under the law anymore. And don't read the entire aspect of that. Now, I always mention this next part we're going to look at, but I haven't gone to it and read it in a while, so we need a refresher. And I need to get better at repeating messages that I've done, because we listen to songs over and over. Yep. You know, I found out that my daughter knows a whole verse from Eminem, and I'm like, I didn't even know you even knew who Eminem was. How did this happen? But it's better than her listening to Ice Spice, which she was listening to last year, so I guess we're making progress. But we watch movies over and over, and again, listen to songs. We all listened to Not Like Us 3,000 times last year. That's everybody's number one song on their Spotify list. So you can hear about what the Most High has done to you, for you, more than once, right? Because he's done more for us than Kendrick Lamar has done. Amen. Or insert your favorite artist or your favorite movie. Because the one thing people, I don't even like Kendrick. I was a Drake fan, actually. So. Let's go to Acts chapter 21. Let's get that off the screen. Acts chapter 21, 20 through 21. And when they heard it, they glorified the master. And they said to him, you see, brother, how many myriads of Jews there are who have believed, and they are all zealous for the law. Oh, interesting. This is after Jesus has died. Verse 21. But they have been informed about you, meaning Paul, that you teach all the Jews who are among the nations to forsake Moses, saying that they ought not to circumcise their children, nor to walk according to the customs. So context here, because we jumped in the story. There are these new people that are excited about the law. But they heard that Paul is teaching people not to follow the law, the same thing that we use today. So we understand where we're at in the story? Let's continue. Let's see what happens. Because they said, we heard about you, Paul. We heard that you're telling the people in the other nations not to follow the rules anymore and to go against what Moses wrote. So let's see what happens. Let's look at facts, okay? Verse 24 and 25 through 26. Take them and be purified with them, and pay their expenses so that they may shave their heads, and that all may know that those things of which they were informed concerning you are nothing, but that you yourself will also walk orderly and keep the law. Interesting again. But concerning the people who believe, we have written and decided that they should observe no such thing, except that they should keep themselves from things offered to idols, from blood, from things strangled, and from sexual immorality. So, context, they discover that these converts have to follow all the same letters of the law that they follow. Because these are Hebrews that went into the other nations and lived among them, and now they're trying to come back. And Paul says, get them under the rules, okay? Like, we got to do that first. That's the important thing. So the next day, Paul took them to be purified and set them up proper according to the law. So he said, we're going to follow all the rules because you guys have been out here living reckless. Let's come back to the things that our fathers did, our ancestors did, and we're going to do it the right way. All right, so we still following. Amen. Verse 27 through 29. Now, when the 7 days were almost ended, the Jews from Asia, seeing Paul in the temple, stirred up the whole crowd and laid hands on him, crying out, Men of Israel, help! This is the man who teaches all men everywhere against the people, the law, and this place. And furthermore, he also brought Greeks into the temple and has defiled this holy place. For they had previously seen Trophy and Effie with him in the city, whom they supposed that Paul had brought into the temple. So they didn't have any evidence of this. They supposed that this happened. So the reason why this was so big of, because we need historical context, because the Bible is a historical document. Like 200 years before this time period, the Greeks had took over the temple and did a pig offering to Zeus. And then they had it over. That's where Hanukkah comes from, was when the Jews took back the temple. That's the whole thing. So they're like, Paul's doing the same thing that we were liberated from. So who's the people that are upset about this right now? It's in verse 27 in the first sentence. Right. So these Asian Jews were tripping. Now a key part is that these are Hebrews that lived in Asia. These are not Asians that were Jews. You have to understand this. Now Paul is arrested and he gets accused of telling people not to follow the law. This is why Paul is in prison this time. He's accused of telling people not to follow the law of Moses. The same thing we accuse him of today. So when it is finally his turn to talk, when it's time for his defense, let's see what Paul says. Chapter 24, verse 13 and 14. Nor can they prove the things of which they now accuse me. They accuse me of telling people not to follow the law, but there's no evidence. You can't find anybody that heard me say that. Them Asian Jews was tripping. They saw a trophy in them and started going wild. Verse 14. But this I confess to you, that according to the way which they call a sect, I worship the living God of my fathers, believing all things that are written in the law and in the prophets. So Paul himself, when he was on trial, under oath, he didn't say we're not under the law anymore. It's all about faith. We don't have works. He said, I follow everything that Moses said and the other authors. So if he said that, how can we in the American church say anything against it? But we have to read it to understand this happened, versus being spoon-fed a verse here and a verse there. I challenge you to read this whole story. It gets a little boring because Paul gets transferred from prison to prison and he gets interviewed by multiple people in this, so I condensed it a little bit for entertainment's sake. But Paul himself said, I believe all things. So if somebody in the American church is trying to use a writing of Paul to justify sin, are they part of the wheat or are they part of the tares? Because the tares look like it. They're dressed in a robe. They have a Bible. They're professing. They're confessing. They're doing all these things. The same thing that Jesus said would happen in the end times, in judgment. We prophesied in your name. I don't know you. I was wondering why you kept saying my name. We never met. You definitely don't love me, because if you loved me, you would. So, and if this was a court case and I was the lawyer, I would say case closed. There's no evidence. Nobody came to testify that Paul was doing any of these things. But still in the American church, everybody says that Paul did these things. But let's keep going. Because David is a man after what? David wrote the longest chapter in the Bible. Psalm chapter 119. Want to guess what that chapter is about? That's mentioned in there. Just think about what I'm talking about. About the law. About the law. The Torah is mentioned 25 times in Psalm 119. Precept is mentioned 21 times. And statute is mentioned 22 times. The longest chapter in the Bible is about following the law, being pure by following the law. So he's a man after, you guys said it already. So if if it's important, if he's after his own heart, wouldn't he be believing in the same things? But we love lawlessness in the American church. We have no consideration for it. It's always, the question always, well, I'm a new Christian. Where should I start? Here, start in the New Testament. But they mentioned, what are they talking about? Like they're going to be confused. You wouldn't do that with anything else. No. You wouldn't tell them, what movie should I watch first in the Avengers Infinity War? Like, who's Thanos? Why are they all mad at this guy? I don't get these jokes that they're making, these references. In English class, and reading, and you have a book, which book should I start at? What chapter? Chapter 12. So that's what really gets going. Think about your favorite film series. Oh, I love Harry Potter. You're not going to start the last movie. Like, well, why is Harry so mad at this guy? I don't know. I never watched Harry Potter. I'm making it up. Don't mention his name. Voldemort, don't say she knows the lore. Don't say his name. But we don't do that with anything else. But then in the most important thing, our spiritual eternity, I'll start in the middle. Start 3/4 in. Well, why is it so important that the Word was with God in the beginning? Go to the beginning to figure it out. He's mentioned there. I'm getting to the end. Now this is where we get fun here. So I posed a little teaser on Wednesday at Bible study. And I said, does anybody know who the devil makes war with in the end times? And nobody answered, and nobody texted me or anything. Well, I found out. And I Googled it to see if Google will give you the answer. It doesn't.
Well, I know, but by accident.
Yeah. It's not the church. It's not the chairs. And it's not the American, European style of church. But don't take my word for it. Take the word for it. We're going to go to Revelation, and let's take John's word for it, the disciple whom Jesus loved, right? Revelation chapter 12, 15 through 17. So we're going to the end. So this is after, because John is getting a vision of the future. So this is after the writings of Paul. This is after the Gospels. This is after everything. Don't we understand? All right, because you're not going to like this. He's never going to stop talking about the law after this. Revelation chapter 12, 15 through 17. So the serpent, you know who the serpent is, right? The shining one, spewed water out of his mouth like a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away by the flood. But the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. Verse 17. And the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he went to make war with the rest of her offspring, those who keep the commandments of Yah and have testimony of Jesus Christ. So the devil at the end is looking for, his battle is against those that follow the commands. That's who he's coming after. So if you aren't following the commandments, you don't got to worry. You aren't on his radar. He ain't concerned about it. Darren didn't say this. Who said it? John's getting a vision of the future. Now, I answered this already, but for my Bible scholars in here, I have a tough question. The vision that John is having, does this take place after Jesus has died on the tree? I have some head nods. Yes. Told you some hard questions. Does this take place after the teaching of Paul? Yes. Does this take place after January 19th, 2025? Yes. See, you guys are smarter than I thought. So this is after everything. He says, and the dragon was enraged, and he went to make war with those who keep the commandments. I don't see a way we can spin that to where the commandments are passed away, when at the end of times, that's who the devil's looking for, is the people following the commandments. And then the thing we need to ask our rebellious minds, why do we want to break the commandments so much? Like, why do we want to be so rebellious of what Yah told us to do? Like, it was good enough for Moses. It's not good enough for you? All those Israelites followed it, and when they followed it, things went well. And when they didn't, things went bad. Then we wonder why our lives look a certain way when we aren't following it. But maybe you don't want to be at war with the devil. I'll be safe. I just won't follow the commandments. He won't come after me. But then you're not an enemy of the devil anymore. I think I'll take my chances with the former. So if you aren't following his commands, then this portion of the book isn't about you. Actually, not much of the book of the Bible is the collection of the books in the Bible are about you. Because that's what it talks about every step of the way. I've consistently shown you that. If you aren't following his commands, the devil isn't your enemy. But if you aren't following his commands, then Yah is your enemy. And what happens to the enemies of Yah in this vision that John is having? Glad you asked. Let's go to it. Revelation chapter 14 through 20. Then I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and on the cloud sat one like the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him who sat on the cloud, thrust in your sickle and reap, for the time has come for you to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. Remember Jesus mentioned that about throwing those people, those tares into the fire with gnashing of teeth? Verse 16. So he who sat on the cloud thrust his sickle in the earth, and the earth was reaped. You guys know what a sickle is? That's like what the Grim Reaper carries, a little sickle. It's a little metal thing, just to clear out the weeds and the tares. Sounds like what Jesus was talking about, but let's see what happens. Because I'm purposely divided this up. Verse 17. Then another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle. And another angel came up from the altar, who had power over fire, and he cried out with a loud cry to him with the sharp sickle, saying, thrust your sickle and gather the clusters of the vine of earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. Remember, how do we know the difference between the wheat and the tares? When it's ripe. That's when the wheat changes color. It's like, oh, now we know exactly who's who. Verse 19. So the angel thrust his sickle into the earth and gathered the vine of the earth and threw it in the great winepress of the wrath of Yah. And the winepress was trampled outside the city, and blood came out of the winepress up to the horses' bridles for 184 miles. So 184 miles of blood for the enemies of Yah. Now, I know this is contrary to what the Church of Tares message is, but I don't want to be in the winepress of the blood spilled. Amen. We need to stop being disobedient. Amen. I know this was a lot, but we are at the end. In closing, let's look back at the author of Hebrews. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 26 through 29. If we deliberately keep on sinning after we have received the knowledge of truth, no sacrifice for sins is left, but only a fearful expectation of judgment and of raging fire that will consume the enemies of Yah. So he said, if you sin, if you go against the law, because sin is what? Sin is lawlessness. So if you keep on being lawless, you are an enemy of Yah. Verse 28, anyone who rejected the law of Moses died without mercy on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. How much more severely do you think someone deserves to be punished who has trampled the Son of Yah underfoot, who has treated as an unholy thing the blood of the covenant that sanctified them, and who has insulted the Spirit of grace? So those people, those tares that try to tell us his grace is sufficient, we have his grace, we don't need the law anymore. What does the author say? They have insulted his grace. Because his grace is for what you did before you knew. After you know, it's a different ballgame. You keep, again, verse 26, if you deliberately keep on sinning, you're now an enemy. And I just read to you what happens to the enemies. The author says that it was bad when people rejected the Torah, but the people that reject it now that the Messiah has ratified it and showed us how to properly live it, you are an enemy, and I refuse to be an enemy of the Most High. Thank you, Father, for adding a blessing to the reading of the word.